Morning, YouTubers. So today we're going to be teaching a bear how to stick weld. No, actually what we're going to be doing is part 2 of a 70-14 testing. So if you watch my previous video, which if you haven't, go and watch it, I ran these Hobart 70-14 1/8 rods, had, I would say, undesirable welds from them. Now it could have been me, maybe I was tired, maybe whatever, I'll take responsibility for it. It didn't really run that well, but I saw a lot of unusual signs that kind of was pointing towards maybe there's something wrong with the rods. Now, if you remember, there was a weird bead appearance. So it had like I guess like a crater appearance to it, or like real bumpy, real grainy welds. I didn't like that. Seemed to have excessive spatter no matter what my amperage was set to. And I ran it within the spec of what the rod said, and then even off camera I ran a couple beads, and no matter what I did, it just seemed to A, have excessive spatter, and B, have an odd looking weld. So I went out and I bought these Weld 70-14s by ESOB, as you can see, 70-14. And we're going to be doing some testing with this and comparing the differences. Now, I'll give you a little heads up on this. I kind of did a bunch of reading and investigation on what might be the problem, and I think what's going on is those rods over here are contaminated with excessive moisture, which you wouldn't really think that because I used like 5 of these after I bought them, and they've been in this case inside of a toolbox, but who knows? But I think that's a case, and to try and test if that's the case, I actually am cooking some of those off in a rod oven just to see if they run any different. So anyways, without anything more said, let's get into it. So right off the bat, these darker color rods are the Hobarts, the lighter ones are the ESOB. I don't really see any issues with either rod. Now the Hobarts, being that they seem to run a little bit odd, I don't see any indication like where the flux is split or like water contamination, like obviously like discolored areas. No real issues there. And I can tell you 100% fact that this box of them, like I said, I used a couple of them years ago. I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I bought these. Then the box was sealed and it's basically been in a toolbox. So how much moisture these could have really picked up? Not a whole lot, at least from, I would say a realistic standpoint. So for this test, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna run one pass here with the ESOB, and in an equal distance, I'm going to run one pass with the Hobart, both at 114 amps. Now these ESOBs, they do not list amperage ratings on them, which is kind of unfortunate. It is kind of nice, especially if you're new, to have an amperage range on a package. It doesn't. The Hobarts, as I said in a previous video, they say 120 to 145 amps. So you know what, I will bump it up to 120 amps just so that I'm running these, or at least a Hobart within the range of what it normally should. One trick that I didn't mention before is generally whatever the diameter of the rod is in decimal points gets you in the ballpark of the amperage it runs at. And that's in the case of everything kind of but like your 60 series rod, your 6010, 6011. But with these, being that it's an 1/8 inch, which is 0.125, that's 125 amps, that's the ballpark. But we're going to run it at 120. So let's do that. Huh, interesting. Let's look at this closer. So from a bead appearance standpoint, I would say they look a lot different. Now, I'll blame myself. The first pass, which was this guy, which was run with the ESOB, I had to cram the rod in a little bit more. My arc gap got a little bit too long. But the bead appearance of it, pretty smooth overall. Yeah, there's some spatter there. When you look at this weld, so it's wetted out more. And yeah, the plate would have been preheated a little bit more here, honestly, but not a whole lot. And you can see like the bead itself looks nothing like it. The travel speed, even you can see where I picked up a little bit of speed, that weird graininess texture, I don't see that anywhere on this weld at all. Which I find that kind of interesting. I mean, that the bead looks that much different. So what I'll do now, I'll run another pass. Same thing with the ESOB, another one with the Hobart, and we'll look at those. All right, like an idiot, I forgot to hit record. I just ran another pass with the ESOB, and the slag just kind of came right off of it without even trying. Let's run the Hobart. As an FYI, the ESOB are the left two, the Hobart are the right two. Now I did cool it down after I ran the ESOB pass. And I did get arc blow on this guy near the end. It's hard to tell because, I mean, if you look, there's a lot of spatter on both of these rods. Now, it seems like increasing the arc gap with this particular rod just makes it worse. Definitely don't want to long arc it. If you look there, the beads look completely different. I mean, they somewhat have a similar like color to them, but this more or less kind of looks like maybe a 6013. This, I don't know, the bead looks weird to me. The color, I don't see as many divots in this as before. I still don't like all of the spatter. I mean, that's a lot of big hard spatter on this. And both rods kind of did that. Yeah, you can really see the difference in just the overall color. It also seems to me like this produces wider welds by a little bit. I mean, the travel speed between this and this was pretty much the same, and you can tell they look different. Interesting. So now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to run a uphill bead, and I'll tack this down to my plate here, and then I'm going to run an uphill bead between both of these and then look at it. All right, so I'll run the ESOB first. I down the amperage to about 114 amps. I would think that would be in the ballpark. Now this plate is cold, you can see it's a little warm. I can hold on to it for a decent length of time. So that actually ran pretty decent uphill. I don't think it's going to be an award-winning weld, but yeah, not bad. I'm going to get and run this one right away, and let's see. Yeah, you can see it's not that hot here. I can touch it. So it's not heat soaked or anything yet, but I'm going to run this as fast as I can. All right, I'm going to let this cool off, wire wheel it up, and we'll see what we got. All right, so let's see where we're at so far. This was the 7014 ESOB run uphill. This was the 7014 Hobart run uphill. Now, I had a lot better results with both rods than I did before. Now, judging by the bead width, my travel speed was likely slower with this, obviously. But what I found with this is it was running like I was running maybe 20, 30 more amps than what I should have been. Okay, and the bead's very rough uphill before. The funny thing is, though, you look at this, like the profile of this, it's like lumpy, and that's for both rods. I would say this one's more lumpy. Now, I wasn't trying to perfectly tie into these beads. All I wanted to do was run a bead between them. So that's somewhat contributing. But you can see, like in the flat position, pretty decent looking weld. But in the vertical up, it tends to be lumpy. And maybe I could get some of that out if I really dialed in my travel speed. But I don't know. Running it vertical up, yeah, will it do it? Yeah. Does it look good? I would say no. Now, a lot of this spatter cleaned off with a wire wheel, but I would still say that this has an excessive amount of spatter. I don't like that either, but interesting. So we had different results. One of the things I want to do, because you can see again a lot of spatter on these beads actually look very similar to these, a little bit wider. It's almost like I ran more amperage or a longer arc or something, but yeah, that's definitely ugly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tack this, and I'm going to run both rods uphill on this and just see if maybe there isn't a surface contaminant on this plate, or maybe it was just me, who knows. But let's do that now. All right, so let's look at our results here. This is the ESAB, this is the Hobart. I find it interesting that from the get-go, when I lit both of these up, it seems to me like the Hobart rod wants to deposit a wider weld no matter what I did. And even it seems that way on here. So like based on, like you look at these, and it's gonna be a little bit hard because I welded there, but like the first weld and even the second one seem to be wider with the Hobart. It also seems to be the case here, and I felt like I was traveling faster with the Hobart rod than I was with the ESAB. But you can see the weld is nowhere near as wide as this, so I'm almost thinking my travel speed before was a little bit too slow. And honestly, what may have happened is I wonder if somehow my machine, which I checked it, maybe the arc force somehow glitched out and it had it set very high. Because I just remember it like chewing away at the plate really bad no matter what I did. And I don't see that at all today. So I'm going to take a guess and say maybe the arc force is somehow set higher, or maybe I didn't look at the right thing. You know, hey, we're all prone to mistakes, myself included. But both of them do run uphill, just not really good. If I had to pick a winner, no doubt I would pick the ESAB. It's actually significantly easier to run uphill from the little bit of testing I've done so far, and it seems to have a little bit less spatter. So between those two, I would definitely pick the ESAB rod. I mean, the bead appearance-wise, it's very similar. I don't like that chunkiness, like that, the way it looks. I mean, these are a little bit better. And it's also weird if you look at this. Hopefully I can get this to focus. Yeah, it's so hard for you to see, but there's like little divots in this. Like right there, you see that? Like all over it. It looks like cluster porosity right at the surface. You see that? And even the ESAB has maybe, yeah, like you see, it might be hard to see, little guy there. And let me look, not through the camera. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit right there. It looks like cluster porosity at the very, surface. So I find that very interesting. Yeah, you can see it really good here, here, here. I mean, is it a weld defect? I would say being at the surface, no, but I'm gonna take and chuck this or clamp it down on a table and grind the surface of this and look and see if that actually is below the surface. I mean, generally, if you have porosity at the surface, odds are you're gonna have some underneath it, but we're gonna grind that down and look at it. I'll do that now. All right, so I ground through these. Now, show you, this is the ESAB rod. Looks clean all the way through. No real issues. Here's the Hobart rod. You can see there's a little pinned out of porosity right there, which if I recall, there was like some surface bubble in that area. Other than that, neck's down quite a bit, so my consistency was a little bit off. It just seemed to me like if I would have went any slower than where it was at, it would have just started dripping on me. Yeah, I mean, based on running a few rods here, the ESAB I'd much prefer. But, I mean, that little bit of porosity is at the end of the world? Nah, not really. I wouldn't worry too much about that, especially because I didn't prep these plates or anything. So, yeah. So that's, I mean, not looking too bad. I think what I'll do... Yeah, interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these rods, both of them on AC, because I didn't do that in a previous video with the Hobart, and I'm just curious to see how it runs. I'm kind of hoping it runs a little bit better, but we won't know unless we try, so I'll switch over to AC and run that. All right, I got the machine set 120 amps on AC current, and I'm going to run the test weld with the ESAB here, and then pretty much right after with the Hobart. All right, so on AC, I actually liked how it ran better, to be honest with you guys. You can still see like the bead appearance is definitely different. Like this has got a weird graininess to it. A ton of what looks to be surface porosity. It's kind of hard to say. I know that doesn't come out that good, but there's like little, like you can see it right here where my thumb is. And the ESAB has some evidence of that as well. Yeah, you can see right where my thumb is. Yeah, like it's literally like cluster porosity at the surface. Again, is it a structural defect? Well, if it's just on the surface, that's not really an issue. If it's down in the weld, yeah, that could be an issue. And you can see tons of it. It's almost like the puddle freezed as molten droplets off the rod were hitting, and it just captured all of that. You can see some, yeah, even on the start. Very interesting. Yeah, I would say I like the way it runs on AC better. It actually seemed to have almost less spatter. It just seemed to run a little bit better. I noticed like with both rods, once I made it to about a third of the way through the plate, the rods started running kind of a little bit different. On DC with AC, it seems to be very consistent start to finish. And you can see like the end doesn't blow out either as bad. Like I'm able to break out of the arc and not chew away at that edge as bad like you saw on DC. It really, anytime I get near the edge, it's chewed out. Interesting. Well, I think I'm going to clamp this down and just grind the surface and kind of look at it to see if there's any evidence of porosity in any of this. All right, the poor man's x-ray is complete. Let me get my little pointer here. I'll use this rod. This right here, don't worry about that. That's just on a tow line. I wasn't trying to tie in that good. I do see indications that indicate possible porosity, mainly this guy right here. And that's on the Hobart one, but that's hard to say on that. Overall, pretty clean. Same thing here. Now again, this looks rough simply because I only touched the surface of it off and I didn't stack them on top of one another, which would give, you know, all of this would be gone if I was really aiming to tie in. Yeah, so I would say very comparable, no real major cluster porosity or anything. And this I ground down a little bit further just to look a little bit more, but I would say that bead appearance that appears to be surface porosity is just how the weld solidified. Maybe it's gas bubbles escaping something, but that does not seem to affect the weld at all throughout it. So that's not a concern, I would say. And again, 7014, you know, it's not a code spec rod for a lot of things. I mean, you're not going to see guys using this on bridges and stuff, so you don't really have to worry about it. But yeah, I guess let's wrap this up. All right, well, what did we learn today? Well, I learned that I'm kind of thinking that somehow the arc force on my machine was set too high, and that's why this rod was digging too much. Like, it seemed to me like no matter how much I lowered the amperage, it still dug into the plate even without trying. And today it's not running like that. It's running completely different. So who knows, glitch in a matrix, but I'll blame, maybe I was tired. I'll blame myself. I'll take responsibility for that. But yeah, we saw ESAB versus Hobart. I mean, you saw in the video that the ESAB rod, the slag pretty much peels itself. The Hobart tends to stick and does not come off as easy. The bead appearance to me looks better on the ESAB rod. I will tell you, in my opinion, it runs better uphill, not by much, but by a little bit. So if I had to pick between the two, I definitely would pick the ESAB rod over the Hobart. I mean, maybe you can only get the Hobart, well, so be it. Now, I do like the way these run on AC. So if you got a buzz box, I would say this is a viable option, because in my experience, those 7018 rods tend to not run that good on those AC buzz boxes. So honestly, I'd almost want to run the 7014 in a flat position than them 7018s with a buzz box if that's all I had. It will give you a stronger weld than like a 6013 will. You know, so in that case, I would say if that's what you're working with, yeah, grab yourself some 7014s, but keep in mind, like running this out of position, don't really like it that much. It's I don't know, the rod seems to have a fair amount of spatter, more than I would like. The bead appearance isn't really that good. And again, maybe some of it's me. I don't really run this rod. I mean, I know I can make a nice looking 7018, so that's what I'll stick with personally. But hey, I get it. A lot of you guys out there don't have that kind of option. So, you know, hopefully this video helped you guys. Now, with that said, since I basically never burn 7014 and I don't want these rods to be left in my shop for all eternity, never burned up, I got a deal for you guys, okay? Deal is, if you want some of these rods, email me at weldingoldschool@gmail.com, okay? Send me an email saying you want some of these, and what I'll do is anyone who wants some of these, I'll send you like 5 rods. I'll send you maybe 3 of these and 3 of those Hobarts so you can play around with these and try them, since I know a lot of you guys probably haven't ran these, and I'm literally never going to go through these ever in my life. I mean, that other box is practically unused in 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. So I'll give these away. Anyone who wants to try some of these, I'll send you 5 or 6 of them snail mail. It'll take probably a week to get you, but whatever. So if you want some, let me know, and run them and send me a picture of the weld you put down. You know, it doesn't. If you can do better than I can, great, awesome for you. If it looks worse, I don't care. Still send it to me, because you know, I'll put sometime in the future, I'll do a little montage of it if enough people get back to me. But yeah, anyways, thanks for sticking around. I learned a fair amount about this. Hopefully you did too. Until next time.